Thanks for joining us today. I'm Holly Culhane with PIS Associates, and we are an HR consulting firm based in California, and we are thrilled that you're joining us today to talk a little bit about, can't we all just get along? I love this topic. As you'll see on the slide in a moment, there's a little construction worker in the corner. There was a National Association of Construction Workers who asked us to come to their annual conference and talk about why people just can't get along. Why can't everybody just do their jobs and be happy and talk with each other and never have a problem and no conflict? And the reality is there's a reason for that. So let's talk a little bit about that this afternoon. So why is getting along with others just so difficult? Why does the workplace seem to cause so many problems? Well, the reality is we make a choice of how we communicate with others, and those choices are based on a number of different aspects. But there are 4 different kinds of interaction. The first is assertive interaction. Then, of course, there's aggressive. We know what that is. There's passive, and there's passive-aggressive. So let's talk about these for just a moment. Assertive is a safe sort of communication. It's one where it's not painful to listen to, it feels respectful, it feels neutral. Whereas of aggressive, kind of the opposite. It feels painful to listen to, and in fact it's almost disrespectful, can be harsh, can be strong. People can often kind of move away from somebody who's being aggressive in their conversation. Passive conversation is sort of that, go along to get along, not a problem, absolutely happy to do it, and really somebody who's just kind of happy where they are and not a problem whatsoever with pushback in what they're getting from their communication with others. Passive-aggressive behavior, though, is a little different. That's more of the, yes to your face, I'd be happy to, but no to your back at the water cooler, right? That's probably the most difficult of all these 4 forms of communication. When we think about it, we ask ourselves, why do we choose one of the other forms of communication? And if I ask you that question, think about it for a second. When you're in your work environment or home or in your volunteer environment, what makes you choose to be assertive or aggressive or passive-aggressive? And I think if you were sitting in front of me, we could easily talk about the fact that it has a lot to do with, gosh, the mood we're in that day, how much sleep we got the night before, the last interaction we have with somebody in our world, the last interaction we have with that person, sometimes what we've heard about that person, sometimes the problems we've had with that individual. So all this stuff in the past can play into how we communicate with people in the present. But what's also important to remember is even our self-esteem plays into that. Dr. Eric Berne wrote a great book in the 60s. I know that was a long time ago, but people love that book, and it's a wonderful read. You can still get it on Amazon, and it's called I'm Okay, You're Okay. So let's take a look at what these forms of interaction have to do with aggressive, assertive, and passive-aggressive. First of all, they're impacted by our feelings. If I'm okay with me at that moment in time, I'm feeling good about who I am and my role in the environment, I feel like I know my job, and I'm okay with the person I'm dealing with, so they know their job pretty well, we've had no problem interactions, things are pretty good, then typically I'm going to use an assertive form of interaction. Safe, neutral, easy to listen to, respectful. If, however, I'm okay with me, I feel good about my job, my role, I'm comfortable, my self-esteem is pretty high in regard to the role I'm playing, but I'm not okay with you. Maybe we had a bad interaction, maybe you required me to do something I didn't like, maybe you gave me some pushback at some point in time, then I may very well use aggressive interaction. And of course, if I'm not okay with myself, self-esteem a little low, maybe on this particular job or this particular task or this particular role, I'm questioning myself, really not sure and confident with who I am in that role, but I'm okay with you because I'm sure that you've got your job down and I know that you do your job well, and actually you might do your job a whole lot better than I do my job, then I may very well use passive form of interaction. In other words, I'm going to just say whatever to get along. And if you ask me to do something, I'll say yes. If I have a different opinion, I probably won't share it. Just passive in my behavior, my communication, interaction with you. But if I'm not okay with me, low self-esteem with regard to that task or that project or that company or that team, and I'm really not okay with you either, so you had come on to me a little too strong or assigned the job I didn't like or maybe spoke to me in a way I didn't appreciate. Not okay with me, not okay with you. Now we get passive-aggressive interaction. So the question we really ask ourselves as we get to that point is, what do we do with that? That conflict takes place. So there are a couple of points we want you to remember today. Number one is the first thing is to realize that conflict is often based on different perspectives. We're not all the same. We know that. Different doesn't equal wrong. Different just equals different. My daughter-in-law, one day a number of years ago, were talking about how she folded pages over to find a place in a catalog she would look at later, and I had folded them differently. We looked at each other and laughed and said, different's not wrong, different's just different. And that's really what it is. People are all raised differently, different backgrounds, different educational experiences, different life experiences, and all that play into who we are. And different just is different, not wrong. So that happens in a work environment. We realize that it just takes place. Tell me a little bit about, if you were here and could, have you ever avoided conflict? Have you ever avoided somebody so much that you walked around the building to get to your office or to your place, to conference room or where you worked, just to avoid where they were sitting? Have you ever not gone to work one day because you knew somebody would be there that day? Have you ever avoided answering an email or answering a phone call when you saw the extension it was coming from? Now the question is why? Why in the world have you avoided that conflict? Because we know, and we know, and we know, and we know that it never gets better. It's not going to go away by itself. It's not going to just all of a sudden disappear. It won't just grow wings and fly away. And the reality is it will stay there and fester. And when we stuff our feelings or our emotions or our perspective or our opinions in a situation where we should be sharing them, the reality is we typically blow at that point. So we know that with the number one point, we need to realize that conflict is often based on different perspectives and we're not all the same. Number two, take responsibility for dealing with the conflict. That's right, it is your job, it is my job. After all, I love this quote from a Spanish proverb, I should say. After all, I love this Spanish proverb. It takes two to quarrel, but only one to end it. It takes only one person to come forward and say, hey, can we talk about that situation? Can we work through that together? It seemed like we kind of got sideways in that situation. Can we work through it and talk about it? Which takes, of course, courage. Amelia Earhart, love this quote. Courage is the price that life exacts for granting peace. Courage is the price that life requires or exacts for granting peace. We have to have the courage to take the first step, go to the person that we have an issue with, and talk through the problem. So you say, gosh, Holly, that's great. I can realize we're all different. I can take the responsibility, but how in the world do I take that first step? How in the world do I say, excuse me, but you really ticked me off yesterday? Or, hey, I saw a conflict between you and a coworker. Can we talk about that? So here's a 4-step conflict resolution process, super easy in the sense that it's easy to remember. It takes some work to do. It's called your turn, my turn, mutual planning, and follow through. Kind of simple, right? So first step is your turn. This is where you might go up to somebody and say, hey, Susie, I noticed we kind of didn't meet on the same page at that meeting yesterday. Could we talk a little bit about that? We'll assume she says yes, and then you say, I'd like to hear your side of the story. What do you think took place? So you see the big difference there right off the bat? You're not saying, hey, what's with that? You didn't agree with me? I thought we were on the same page when you walked into the meeting. You're simply starting off by saying, I kind of want to hear where you're coming from so I know how to work through this with you. And then there's some things you do. You listen without interrupting. Really important, really hard. If you're a person that's we'll say an otter of the personality world, in the DISC world, you're somebody who's really verbal, highly interactive. People know when you walk in the room. It's hard to keep this shut. I have that problem. Listen without interrupting. Secondly, show sincere interest. You should not even walk down this road until you're really ready to have a sincere conversation. If I go to Susie and say, can I hear your side of what happened yesterday? Because I'd like to talk through it. If I don't mean it, Susie's going to know it. Not too many of us are great enough actors to play that part very well and pull it off. So my encouragement to you is have the conversation, but make sure you really mean it in here first. Next step, as part of your turn, is to hear their entire story. So don't wait till they get this far through this much of a story and then cut them off with your explanation or your response or your defense for what you did. Wait till they're entirely finished. You can paraphrase when they're finished. You can say things like, so what I'm hearing you say is, or so from your perspective, this is what I did. You're saying this so they know you've heard them. Because saying I understand really isn't quite enough because they may not agree that you do. So the first step in this process is really doing some exploring. And that's important to remember, is that exploring. And exploring starts with an E, right? So think about that for a little while. We're going to come back to that in a second. So explore. I'd like to hear your side of the story. I want to listen without interrupting. I want to show some really sincere interest in what your perspective is. I want to hear your whole picture. And then I want to paraphrase, or you could even say acknowledge what they're saying. And again, that looks like, so what I hear you saying is, or from your perspective, this is what happened, or so to you it looks like X, right? That's acknowledging. Think about that for a moment. E, exploring. A, acknowledging. EA, keep following me on that in just a second. Now this has been the your turn part, right? So now we said, what's next? My turn. So that's an entirely different perspective, as I mentioned earlier. I'm going to go to you with the problem, but I want to hear your side first. And then when you're all done, I'm going to look at you and say, may I tell you my side of the story for a moment? Usually people will say yes if you listened well before, if you acknowledged appropriately, if you showed sincere interest. Most folks are not going to say, heck no. They're going to want to hear what you have to say too, because by now their interest is piqued about why you'd be so concerned and why you'd be engaged, why you would have explored, why you would have acknowledged. So in that part of the process, you get to the point and be brief. You do not have to match them minute for minute and how long their story was. You do not have to match them point for point in everything they made. You do not have to defend each point they made. Remember to pick your battles, but get to the point and be brief. Focus on the issue and really take a real care to avoid personal accusations. We don't have to talk about where they came from or their mama or anybody else involved in the situation. We need to make sure that we say, here's what I saw in the issue, here's what I heard, and here's my perspective. Make sure you speak your view firmly and persuasively, not rudely, not aggressively, but assertively. Remember, assertive is safe communication. It means I'm okay with me and I'm okay with who you are. We may differ, but that's okay. Different isn't wrong. Different is just different. So when I'm speaking firmly and persuasively, I'm speaking with respect. I'm taking a neutral tone. I'm not sounding rude. I'm not sounding defensive. I'm just giving my perspective in a very neutral situation. And sometimes if you hear yourself going out of neutral, just think about that stick shift and go right back to neutral for a moment and say, okay, how do I want to deliver this message? Lastly, include your feelings or your opinion. Gosh, you know, I was really hurt by what happened, or I was really disappointed or frustrated because what you said in that meeting completely didn't match what you said in our meeting the day before. So I was totally caught off guard and I felt kind of blindsided by that. Neutral, assertive, not aggressive. So your turn, my turn. You've asked them for their opinion and their side of the story. You've explored and acknowledged in that point. Then you've gone to my turn. May I tell you my side of the story? Hopefully they've listened respectfully in that process. And now the third point, hopefully you remember, mutual planning. So think hand signals, right? Your turn, my turn. The other person goes first. You know, respect, being nice, kind, what your mom taught you to do. And then my turn. And then mutual planning. So together, we're going to plan going forward. Mutual planning is, okay, I've heard their side. I've had a chance to share my side. We've explored, we've acknowledged. You've actually now responded when you gave your perspective, right? E, explore, A, acknowledge, and R, respond. Got what that spells? Ear. How do we listen? With the ear. So a great listening skill is to explore first, acknowledge then, and lastly respond. When in fact, our natural inclination is to say, hey, wait a minute, that's not how it went off. Or hey, I don't like that side of that story at all. That's not what I remember hearing or what I saw. Wait till you have all the facts to respond. Meaning, do not walk over here till you can intelligently and honestly and with full information respond. Your turn, my turn, that ear skill is employed. And now we're going to mutual planning. Two pieces of mutual planning, brainstorming and negotiating. Brainstorming meaning no wrong answers, go for quantity. What are all the ideas to the answer to this question? How do we move forward? What are the possibilities? You felt this way, I felt this way. We obviously have different perspectives. It may just be a slight disagreement or misunderstanding, but how do we get here? Because the reality is we're on the same team. We're probably in the same company, and reality is we want the same outcome, the best for everybody. So what are the possibilities? Brainstorming. Again, quantity of ideas, no wrong answers, save evaluation till later, write everything down. You come up with this, Susie comes up with that, you come up with this, Susie comes up with 10 more great ideas, you come up with a couple more. All of it's written down, no evaluation, no negativity, no saying that'll never work, just listen, brainstorm, all good ideas when we brainstorm, and write them all down. Then it's letting those ideas build and build and build on each other. She brings one, you bring one, he brings one, you bring one. On they go until all of a sudden you have possibilities you never would have thought of on your own. Then we say, what do we have in common here? So we've brainstormed and we said, okay, what do we really have in common? Well, We both want this project to go well in the end. We both want success for the client or our team or the company. We both want to make sure we're headed the right direction, right? So that's what we have in common. Now, we've identified a shared mission or a shared journey. Guess what that does? Gets you on the very same page. And most of the time in a work environment, even with differences of opinion, we can absolutely say, okay, we do still want the ABC company or whatever it's called to succeed. We still do want our team to go well. We still do want our organization and our clients to succeed in what our project is part of that process. Raise objections now and deal with them. So this is our shared mission. Let's go back to our brainstorming list. I don't think this one will work because, the other person might say, that's a good point. They might then say, I don't think this one will work because, you're probably right. So now you're raising objections to each brainstormed idea. You're dealing with them as they come across the front of you, and as you work through them together. Then you prepare an action plan. Your turn. Please give me your perspective. My turn. May I tell you my side of the story? Mutual planning, this brainstorming. Now we're in negotiating. Now how do we get where we want to be? What is the action plan so we don't get stuck in that kind of situation again? If you tell me this is your response on Monday and that's how you're going to handle the meeting on Tuesday, how do we get past my being blindsided in that process? And of course, you can agree to a meeting ahead of time, you could agree to a quick email, a text, whatever works for the two of you, but make sure you have the action plan in place. Step 4, though, enormously important. You can do the your turn, you can do the my turn, you can even really do the mutual planning well, but if you don't follow up, it will probably not serve you well in the long term. I've been called into situations with teams where they've done 1, 2, and 3, but nobody did number 4. They hugged, they sang Kumbaya, everything was wonderful. They thought, we're great, we don't need to worry about this again. And then what happened? But 2 weeks or 4 weeks or 6 weeks later, that conflict kind of raised its ugly head again. So follow through is automatic. Before you ever leave that meeting together and the action plan is formed, the last step of the action plan is saying, okay, let's meet in 2 weeks and see how we're doing. Shall we meet Friday the 3rd at 2 o'clock? Perfect. So now there's no awkward moment of who's got to call the next meeting. It's already set. And then you can take notes, you can get back together and work through it then. You thank each other for the commitment. You specify who does what on that action plan by when so it's very clear. You schedule that next meeting as I mentioned, and now you can maintain strong relationships. So that first point, realize that we're not always going to agree, but it's just because we're different, not wrong. Number 2, knowing that we have a responsibility to take action. And number 3, remembering that we've got to maintain strong relationships. You're going to need that. There will be a tough day, there'll be a tough meeting, and if you don't take care of things along the way, when that tough meeting comes, you won't have a relationship to endure, and that's what's important. Always clarify the issue and do it calmly. Always address the problem. Listen to the other side a little bit, find out what they have seen or heard, what their perspective is, and then manage your way to resolution. But ignoring or just not dealing with an issue like this is never going to help. So the question you've got is, right now in front of you, who is the person in your life you need to have that conversation with? Who is the person in your life, or what's the relationship in your life, work, home, or otherwise, that you need to make sure you follow through on? What are you going to do with what you learned today? It's just 5 or 10 minutes, but what are you going to do with it? Hopefully something that'll change the relationships you'll take responsibility for, and will give you much more success moving forward. Good luck.